cartoons from present in the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, where nice guys finish first. I'm your host, the pickle on your coleslaw, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. Who is here with me today?
Henry Gilbert, and I was misinformed about the buying power of being a dink.
And who do we have on the line?
Greg Stevens.
And today's episode is the Doug Episodes, Doug Takes the Case, and Doug's Secret Song. So we've done Ren and Stimpy, we've done Rugrats, and now it's time for Doug. In our first year of What a Cartoon, we have to complete the Nicktoons Triforce. He's wisdom.
We barely made it in time.
Rugrats is power, and Ren and Stimpy is courage.
Boy, I don't know. I think of Ren and Stimpy as the more evil one. So
I guess that'd be
feel
power.
Like that should be power and Ganondorf. Yeah.
Let's have our listeners vote in the comments. But our special guest is Greg, who runs the amazing YouTube channel Pop Arena. And I wanted to have you on this podcast because you do the series Knickknacks, which is the most thorough history of Nickelodeon that I have ever seen in my life. I think you can take that credit.
100%.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it's the most thorough so much as we're still very at the beginning of it, but it'll definitely become, I'm going to become the number one authority. I predict by 2025, everybody will come to me as the sole authority on Nickelodeon.
I hope so, because right now there is a, let's say, not so great book that has a similar, much lighter history that only really starts in 1987, but you currently are in 1982, and right now you have 18 videos, I think, about the early years of Nickelodeon. Oh, sorry, 28 videos.
Yeah, a bit more than that. I'm getting close to 30. At the time of this recording, I am on 1982. Very end of 1982. I'm doing the very last show of 1982, which is today's special. About horrors inside a closed shopping mall. And I'm nowhere near Nicktoons at this point. So, but if you want weird shows about Canadian wilderness, which is a lot of what they were airing at this time.
There were a lot of those.
Yeah, definitely check it out. The only thing I've covered so far that anybody here might have heard of is probably Pinwheel, and you can't do that on television.
Yes.
Unless you're in your 40s.
The ones you're covering now. So I, like most children who were lucky enough to have cable in the 80s, at age 5, I think, is when I started watching Nickelodeon endlessly. But that was 87, so some of the shows you're doing were still in rotation, but others I just remember as like one commercial of like, oh yeah, Black Beauty. I think I remember that.
Before the taping, I was telling Greg the show Pinwheel made me feel ennui for the first time as a child. Just listless boredom. Will the rest of my life be like this? That was Pinwheel. But yeah, your episode on You Can't Do That on Television, it's like, I believe 90 minutes long or close to that. Yeah. And I've watched it a few times. It's fascinating, especially because it is Nick's first like mega hit that made them a really viable network.
I'm glad that episode's gone over as well as it has, because I call a few people out.
That's what I loved about it. I'd seen other histories on You Can't Do That on Television before, which I also loved a lot as a kid for a lot of the reasons you list in there, including it being a naughty show on Nickelodeon. But you know, the more I learned about it as like somebody who reads oral histories or wants to read, books or interviews about these shows that I saw as a kid, the more I learned about it, the more I was like, this sounds fucked up. Like this, I don't want to like directly accuse people of things, but there are some very iffy stories in there that sound like, as like, say, some of the stars recount their working conditions there. I'm like, no, that's wrong. That is not how you treat children on set or anywhere.
I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it necessarily, but I got a subtly threatening email from some of the people before the episode came out in preparations for its release. And that's the level we're talking about, where the creators of You Can't Do That on Television are sending me, shame if something happened to this channel. Messages.
Ooh.
What power do they have, anyways?
Nothing.
Yeah.
It was a big bluff.
I mean, one of them is running from taxes right now. It seems like
Yeah.
so. But the amount of research you did in You Can't Do That in Television the first 20 years I watched was so impressive. Like it seemed like you watched not only every possible episode of You Can't Do That on Television available, but also the other shows the guy made beforehand, so you could see him, the people on it repeating sketches, different subject matters coming up over and over again, and also just like their improvements to their form too.
And the origin of slime.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of history to this, and I try to put that same amount of research into everything I do. Not everything can be a 90-minute documentary. There's not a lot of information on a lot of these shows, but I try to just give the most thorough examination I can.
We'll actually talk about a few of the shows you covered in relation to Jim Jenkins, because he was around at Nickelodeon for a while before Doug.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So let's get to Doug. What is our history with Doug? I think Henry and I have the exact same history because we were there on day one, Ground Zero Nicktoons, August 11, 1991, when Ren and Stimpy, Doug, and Rugrats premiered.
I as well. I was a day zero viewer just because Nickelodeon was the greatest TV channel to ever exist for me up till about age 12. And I was watching it every second I could. And so the second they started advertising that they were going to have original cartoons in there, like they did have original programming, but not really animation. Animation was usually whatever they could get from Canada or England or the occasional like anime. So
Danger Mouse.
I loved Danger Mouse. Oh my God, I loved it so
More
much.
ennui for me.
But so the premiere of these Nicktoons, I was counting the days to it, and I watched them every time they were rerun. Anytime they aired again, I was like, I have to watch this. And Doug was my favorite of the first three in original viewing. I have to be honest.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, being their Ground Zero. And also, Nick was hyping it up all summer long, as I recall. It was a big deal. They wanted to make it a big deal. Doug was not my favorite. Ren and Stimpy definitely was my favorite. But I liked Doug. I liked Rugrats. I have no hatred of Doug now. I think there was a period maybe 10 years ago where people were making fun of Doug a lot, like us kids who grew up with it now becoming adults. But I went back to it upon this viewing. It's like, this is just a warm, comfy blanket of a show. I'm not laughing a lot. I'm not feeling a lot of things. Just a nice, very cozy show. How about you, Greg? What was your experience with Doug?
I really wanted it to be Ground Zero, but the Nicktoon premiere was in the evening. And anytime after 5 p.m., that's adult TV time. So I completely missed the actual premiere, but I've been watching those shows since they began airing. I didn't have a sense of the production. I didn't know these are the first original shows. Just that these were shows that Nickelodeon was really proud of and advertising the heck out of them. Like I can differentiate it from Inspector Gadget reruns. Mm-hmm. I had no sense of what Nickelodeon actually created, but I knew this was a big deal because Nickelodeon said it was a big deal. So I watched that out of all of them, and out of all of them, Doug's my favorite.
Wow, still to this day. Favorite. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate Ren and Stimpy, especially on the amount of work put into it. But I was a very weak-stomached kid. I watched it because I kind of felt like I should be watching it, but it's like, when's the Little Bits coming back on?
Yeah, there were very few gross out jokes in Doug. Yes,
Doug, like you said, Doug is a very, very comfy blanket show.
No one is farting in Doug.
Yeah. I think I'm a little younger than you guys. And for me, Doug, the characters are like 11 years old. They're 6th grade. But when you're a little kid, a 6th grader seems like an adult.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if you're in kindergarten or 1st grade.
And I think that was kind of the appeal to me when I was like I think I was 5 when this premiered. It felt like, oh, this is what I get to be. I get to sit in desks and instead of on the floor with crayons, and I get to do sports instead of playground stuff. And That seems lame, but it was in a kind of this exciting look to the future for me.
No, I could see it as being slightly aspirational. I mean, that's why we watch Saved by the Bell, because this is what high school will be like. It wasn't, but yeah.
Doug was minorly aspirational for me. Is like I was 8 going on 9. I was like a month away from my 9th birthday when the episode premiered. And it did make me think like, oh, I'm in 3rd grade now, and this is what like 5th grade or 6th grade will be like. I believe, yeah, Doug is in 6th grade. He graduates from elementary school in the finale, the finale in my mind.
Before Doug Shippuden.
We'll get to that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
It's part of the history.
Yes, but yeah, I did look forward to it. It's like, oh, this is what. I guess this is growing up, is what I said to myself watching it.
A decade before that was popular.
And yeah, that was also why I really gravitated to Doug. In my household, my parents I loved all 3 of them, but my mom loved Ren and Stimpy more than me and my brother.
Wow.
Rugrats was my little brother's favorite, and so that made me think, oh, that's the baby show. I mean, it literally stars babies. And so I did have kind of the weak stomach thing, like Greg's talking about too, of just like Doug was just nice. And it was about also a kid wrapped up in his anxieties, which I definitely felt even then as a 9-year-old. So yeah, it pulled me in. And actually, I have a Doug contest winning story.
Oh
to
my
share.
Lord! Did you meet Doug himself?
No, I did not. But
I thought he was real.
I'm very upset that I spent like an hour going through YouTube compilations of like commercial breaks from Nickelodeon in 1991 to find this. I could not, so your listeners are going to have to trust me on this. But in the run-up to the Nicktoons premiere, or perhaps right afterwards, they did a contest of a giveaway, a pretty simple giveaway of send us a postcard and one of 500 people will win a t-shirt. But tell us which is your favorite of the 3. So clearly it was an internal polling thing to find out what kids' favorite of
They
the
made
3
a focus
was.
group fun.
Yes. and so you could pick Doug, Rugrats, or Ren and Stimpy. My mom sent away 10 postcards for me and 10 postcards for my
Wow.
brother, his for Rugrats and mine for Doug. And mine won for Doug. I had a free Doug shirt that nobody else could own because they were a limited edition one sent to you before they ever made Doug merchandise.
What does a Doug shirt look like?
I mean, it was just the original like key art of like Doug
okay.
and Skeeter and Pork Chop. That's all. Or maybe I think it was just Doug and Pork Chop. But I wore it every chance I could. Also, because as the big brother, I wanted to brag to the little brother, like, you didn't win, I won.
Society approves of my choice.
So, yes, that's how much of a Doug fan I was. I won a Doug contest, even.
Let's talk about Doug's origins. And they all start with a little guy named Jim Jenkins. Sounds like a made-up name, but it's not. Whenever I saw that name, I was like, that looks made up to me.
He does sound like a Stan Lee name production.
Yeah, I mean, if you're named Jim Jenkins, you are going to be a cartoonist or an animator. But so born in Richmond, Virginia in 1953, he studied filmmaking and animation at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And after that, he worked for PBS's children's programming department. And after this, he worked for Nickelodeon at some of their first shows, like Pinwheel, the depression-causing show I talked about earlier, and Hocus Pocus, where he played a character named Professor Rhombus. Now, Greg, you did an entire video on Hocus Pocus, which I never heard of. It was not on TV when I was a kid. Can you explain what Hocus Pocus was?
Yeah, Hocus Pocus. A lot of Nickelodeon shows at the time were what I call package shows, where they took pre-existing material and added a framing device around it. And Pinwheel was that, because they aired a lot of animated shorts. And Hocus Pocus was this story about a wizard from like medieval King Arthur times who comes to the modern day of 1979 to raid a library's film store and watch a bunch of films. And the Professor Rhombus character was a talking book that he lugged around.
Oh.
And it only ran for one season, starred had a bunch of the Pinwheel crew in there, starred Brad Williams. Yeah, Jim Jenkins was mostly art design, but he did act in Hocus Pocus, and he did play either plus or minus on Pinwheel. I always get it confused, and I can never remember which of the Bert and Ernie analogs.
Well, they're both so different, such different characters, and so rich too.
God, they all back to the Pinwheel thing. Watching that just annoyed me. I was annoyed that I ever was entertained by that as a kid. It just because there wasn't anything else on. So if any puppets were on TV, I guess I liked it. But God, it's so awful.
It was dreary.
I've attributed it to like a lazy Sunday feel.
Yeah.
I can't get off the couch or the floor, possibly because of depression caused by Pinwheel. And I have to say, like, we're not giving a lot of context to the world of cable TV. We should. Like Nickelodeon, if you're young, you might not realize this, but Nickelodeon making 3 cartoons at once was a big deal.
Nickelodeon didn't air any cartoons until 1984, 5 years into its run.
And they were a kids' network. Well, early cable was companies basically saying, we have all this time to fill. What do we do? How can we fill this time? Which is why shows like Mystery Science Theater came into being. It's like, that can fill 2 hours. We can run that twice a day if we want to at some point in time. But a network making their own shows that was not just like a host with existing footage was a big deal, which is why Doug was a big deal.
So Jim Jenkins was on Pinwheel. He was on Hocus Pocus. He also did the background plates for a show called By the Way.
Okay.
Which was another package show, Intro to Shorts. Had this woman walk chroma keyed into these painted landscapes, and Jim Jenkins did the landscapes for that. So he was all over Nickelodeon's very first year.
Didn't you recently uncover the only existing footage of By the Way?
Yes, I did.
Wow, that is insane.
We thought that show was completely gone, and then somebody found about 10 minutes worth.
And that's all on your YouTube channel too.
Yes.
So where Doug came into being was, I guess, after that short stint at Nickelodeon, he wasn't doing so great career-wise, relationship-wise, health-wise. He was in a bad period of his life, but he first came up with Doug by just basically sketching funny scenarios that were semi-autobiographical, and the character was named Brian at the time because he just wanted, like, what is the most average name for a kid?
Doug's a little more fun. I'm glad they stuck with. That sounds more trademarkable too than Brian.
Yeah, and it's more punchy too. I like the sound of Doug. So in 1984, with his career stalling out, Jenkins went through a serious breakup and a cycling accident. So with Jumbo Pictures co-founder David Campbell, he created the world of Bluffington and all the characters basically over margaritas at a Mexican restaurant. This is the apocryphal story that he tells about the creation of Doug.
It said he was in a margarita stupor.
Yes. That's he has various different stories about. So in Doug, the characters can have any skin color, green, blue, purple. He said it was because he was drunk on margaritas. Later, that was retconned into him saying, that was my statement to say skin color shouldn't matter. So I feel like they both can work. One is the more fun and one is the more just like moral and I guess lawful good.
I always took the multicolored characters as just like that. It's fun to have colorful characters on a show.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, Doug is pitched as the average boy, which of course means white.
Average means white.
Like, yes, we all know.
This is the most consistent thing Jenkins has been called out on for Doug, and he's always had that kind of privileged white. I don't see color. I don't see race response to it, which I think is probably his biggest flaw.
Yeah.
He's even flip-flopped on the character Skeeter being a black character. In the book Slime, it's an oral history of Nickelodeon. They interview Jenkins a lot about Doug. In that book, he says, yes, Skeeter is a black character. Then in later interviews, he's like, if people think he's black, that's great. So what is it? Like, what's going on? Why does he waffle about that? I really don't understand.
Do you want a bit of trivia on David Campbell, Jenkins's co?
Oh, sure. I didn't find a whole lot on him, actually.
Yeah, there isn't a whole lot. Most stories begin with Doug, but he was, this has nothing to do with Doug, but I think you would get a kick out of it. He was the agent for Joel Hodgson.
Oh my! Wow, I've heard.
And he was the guy who personally sent the demo tapes for the KTMA era Mystery Science Theater. He's the one who sent it to HBO, and they're the comedy channel. So you can actually see his names in the credits for the first cable season of the show.
Amazing! Wow.
Wow. I've
heard my mention of MST3K was not off topic.
that brings me back to stories like that. I think it was Kevin Murphy in one story of the making of MST3K, just talking about how Joel had such a powerful agent that he convinced them to keep production in Minnesota instead of moving it to LA or New York. But wow, that's the same guy who
I had no idea.
the Jim Jenkins. Well, these Jim Jenkins stories that are all over the place, they Remind me of the research I did for our Garfield episode with Jim Davis, where Jim Davis just has like 800 stories, and he's just kind of a raconteur, if you will. Like, he's not the best, even though he's your first source on these things. He's just so all over the place. It's hard to even like know what the real history is.
It's interesting, though, that Jim and David developed the characters without really an intent for them at this point. Like, they just wanted to develop a world and then find things to do with those characters. And one of the things that they did was a pitch for a children's book project called Doug Got a New Pair of Shoes. And you can see pictures of this online. So it's a pitch for a children's book about Doug getting gigantic shoes. And it is the Doug you know and love. No publisher wanted it, and plans fell through after some internal changes at Simon & Schuster. So it could have been a book, but it just sort of fell through. So those characters never existed in book form. But before the series, Doug appeared on TV twice, in 1989 and 1990, in two completely unrelated contexts. So in the first appearance, he was in a Florida grapefruit juice commercial. In his Doug vest and his Doug shorts, drinking grapefruit juice. It's great. And the second one was a USA Network ident where Porkchop is there. Doug looks a little cooler with different clothes, but he's stacking a bunch of TVs in the shape of America, and he's like climbing a ladder and dropping the last TV into place, and Porkchop turns them all on. That bumper existed past the beginning of Doug the TV series, which always confused me. Like, why is Doug on USA? Why is Doug like advertising for USA Network? So I don't know how those came into being, but I guess he was just selling the character to different properties, different networks. Like, what can we do with this Doug character? Can we make him sell grapefruit juice? Can you make him sell your TV network? Things like that.
Well, I think an advantage in that is that the actual Doug design is kind of hard to age. You could say he's 11 years old, like he's in the cartoon. You could probably say he's 30, depending on the context you put him in. A very vague design.
And very much a Fido Dido character. I don't know why they never sued him, but I think of Fido Dido. If you know who that is, hats off to you. You're also old.
With the Doug stuff too, I think he was doing what a lot of independent animators were doing then, which was just commercial work to wait until you can sell your thing, right?
I think like Joe Murray. And a lot of animators got their start in those station idents when they were using like a lot of cool independent animation to make those.
In a way, that felt like their pilot program at Nick. Like that's what. Sorry, Greg. Who was the guy who did all the best like doo-wop Nick ones? Who then did the Thanksgiving special?
Oh, Joey Album.
Yeah, I loved those. I wished he had a full-time thing there that maybe production-wise they couldn't have figured it out. But
that was one of the 8 pilots that Nick picked up for Nicktoons, but only 3 made the pass.
Thunder Lizards.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? It's like the only pilot actually available.
I haven't seen it. No, is that on YouTube?
Yes, it is. It's not amazing. The animation's really good, but the stories.
Let's go to 1990, I believe, or possibly late 89. Nickelodeon exec Vanessa Coffey is kicking off Nicktoons. She is an instrumental figure in the history of modern animation. We talked about her on Ren and Stimpy and on Rugrats and possibly on Rocco too, but she's super important to everything you love about animation on TV right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's always interesting to me that these like female executives are so important in this, like, and Vanessa Coffey's one of them, how many times they come up in What a Cartoon episodes. And it just takes me back to how shitty a lot of creators of shows were to like made up female executives when I feel like they were often the positive gatekeepers who made like a Vanessa Coffey, especially with Ren and Stimpy. Like,
I was going to bring that up. I mean, John Kricfalusi sucks. On the record, he sucks.
Absolutely.
That's putting it lightly. I don't want to get into too dark territory here, but
and she did everything. She worked very hard to try to make it work with that guy. Like Henry Gilbert is not famously known for defending executives, but I think she was one of the better ones out there.
Yeah, she took a risk on Ren and Stimpy. She said, "We will only buy 6 of these, and if it's a failure, you can fire me." Like, she put her job on the line for that show, and it was a big hit. But all the early Nicktoons were big hits. So she was looking for things to make into Nicktoons, which would be Nickelodeon's original cartoon, a completely new idea, not an anime they bought or reruns they bought. It would be things that they would help produce, and it would only air on their networks.
And that's just so much money. Like, that was the type of budget Viacom for original animation production. Viacom in the 80s wasn't really ready to spend that kind of money, so it was a big step for them into being a more real network to actually pay for the production of original stuff, right? On so many of your knickknacks, it's about them working on a shoestring budget and just making it work. So
Nicktoons was around the time where the channel was finally gaining momentum. It was just finally like, I think we're actually going to be a success. Let's try something.
So Jim shows up to Vanessa Coffey's office, and he uses the Doug got a new pair of shoes pitch to pitch the idea of Doug. And in that pitch, I believe there's the town is fleshed out, the characters are fleshed out. Jim put a whole lot of thought into the idea of like this world, which I think a lot of showrunners were not doing at the time. It's a big thing now. Like you write your story Bible, you figure out the layout of the world you're building for your characters. But I think like that was a much rarer idea back then.
Yeah, our friends Ian and Toby from OKKO, they talk a ton about how hard they worked on their pitch and how the complexities of pitching out shows. Like same with Rebecca Sugar too. She talked about how her and Ian and everybody went through it. Or also the fun pitch that they invented for SpongeBob SquarePants when we did that episode.
Like dressing up their room like an aquarium or something like that. That's what I heard about it. But yeah, she was actually so excited about this pitch that she ran out of the room, according to Jim Jenkins, to tell her boss, like, we have to make this into a pilot. And that pilot was Doug Can't Dance, which aired as a segment in the second episode of Doug. And it looks very different from the rest of the series. I prefer how it looks compared to the rest of the series.
I kind of like it more too. I was going to say the same thing.
But they couldn't keep that quality and like individuality of animation up for a 52 episode series. So things got much more flattened out. The lines became not squiggly at all.
It's like Squiggle Vision, but real animation, not a computer screen.
Like when Roger first shows up in that pilot, it looks like he was drawn with a wiggle pen. It's great.
As a kid, when I first viewed these, I believe in the premiere block, I think they did show the pilot, but then in air order, it was they made an episode that's a real first episode of Doug Moves to Town.
Yeah, he moves from Bloatsburg to Bluffington.
And I think I don't want to act like I was a really smart kid, but eventually, after enough viewings, I think it hit me like, oh, maybe this was the first one, and then they did the other one second. Like I didn't know the term pilot until a few years later, until maybe when I saw Pulp Fiction, that was the first time I learned the word pilot.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Doug Can't Dance was one of 8 pilots produced by Nickelodeon to be a possible Nicktoon. They were going to make 4 into series, but they only made 3 into series, and I'm not sure why. Budget things, maybe
Sounds
Ren
like
and Stimpy
money.
was expensive, who knows, but they only decided on 3. Eventually, they would make way, way more Nicktoons than that. And the pilot is based on the fact that Jenkins himself can't dance because of his religious upbringing. And religion is sort of the subtext and background of Doug that's not really on the surface. Like it's a kind of a vaguely religious show in some ways, according to Jenkins.
Not explicitly religious, but it is very Sunday school moralizing in terms of how simple and straightforward morals are.
It's a very Christian ideal on that your entertainment should also educate you morally, which was just like, that is how we made books acceptable to read, where we would explain, no, this book will teach you how to be a better person. That's why you read this fiction book and don't read the Bible. Read this book about a chaste woman,
One of the things Jenkins did was make sure that his writers, whenever they turned in a script, that the moral was on the cover. This is what Doug learns from the story.
It's so funny, though, that Doug had this philosophy, and it was running at the same time as Ren and Stimpy, which is just like as disgusting and violent as possible. There was no moral, nothing. And I think Rugrats wasn't as into moralizing as well. Like
they didn't want to learn a lesson. It was more of a satirical bent to it, like Simpsons, so it was more about satirizing like what it's like to be an overly educated parent in the world of bringing up kids in the 90s.
And I mean, at best, Angelica would get punished, but it's because you want to see her punished because she was acting out the entire episode.
The closest point of comparison, I think, to Doug in terms of the Nickelodeon oeuvre is what came after with Hey Arnold.
Yes,
it's got a lot of the same kind of similar character archetypes, some similar stories, but it's in terms of just how it sees humanity and how it sees just the complexity of life. It's really night and day between those two shows.
Yeah, I think Doug befriends misfits, but he thinks they're weird, and he maybe learns they're less weird. But Arnold comes to Misfits with an open heart every time.
And I think Doug is ultimately a lot more hopeful in a naive way, the series as a whole, because in the ones I watched, it's sort of just like, well, everything will work out. It'll be fine.
It always does. Yeah.
It's a big misunderstanding. Every problem you have.
Every single time.
Yes.
And when Roger is always punished too, like they make sure that that's something like a bully sometimes gets away with things in Rugrats, and meanwhile, like Ren is just evil reigns supreme in Ren and Stimpy, or even in the next one, Rocco. Like Rocco's fucked everything. He can't do anything in the modern world happily.
It's a much more cynical show where the little guy rarely ever wins. One last thing I want to point out before we get into the history of the series itself is that it's worth noting that the squiggly line thing that Jenkins does with Doug, which was sort of erased after the pilot, very much based on the illustrator and cartoonist R.O. Bleckman. If you YouTube him, he's still alive. He was born in like 1920, so he's up there. His commercials look a lot like Jenkins' early animation. Like everyone is a little squiggly line, lots of squiggly hairs on their head. So I feel like Jenkins was directly inspired by this figure.
As the series went on, it was less. I think it was less became less about the lines than it became about the colors.
Yes,
I think there's this very nice watercolor aesthetic throughout the series, and I was noticing this as I was going through episodes. You could literally pause this show on any frame, and it would look like an appropriate storybook illustration.
Oh, you're totally right about that. Yeah, the characters really pop from those washed out watercolor backgrounds because of how bright they are.
Yeah, no, the storybook roots, you can really see it there. If they'd only published that, well, okay, I was gonna ask, maybe this comes up later, but like, so Jim Jenkins, does he own Doug, or like did they who owned Doug?
I believe
then? Right now Disney.
Yeah, right now Disney does.
Okay, but I was curious of like, because it seems I couldn't tell the ownership on like Viacom versus all the original Nicktoons. Like it seems like sometimes they own it entirely, and other times it seems like it can be sold or licensed elsewhere.
Yeah, like with Ren and Stimpy, they were able to go to Spike TV and make terrible episodes. And Rugrats can now be on Hulu? Can make new things with Hulu or Amazon or something?
They're making it with Splat and Paramount. Or are they? The film just got delayed about 4 months. So look forward to that in January 2021 now.
I'm sure it's worth waiting for. Let's talk about the production of Doug, and we can explain why the ownership is kind of weird. So Doug lasted for 4 seasons of 13 episodes, and that was a total of 52 episodes, which ran from August 11th, 1991 to January 2, 1994. In that short period of time, every original Doug ran in its entirety.
There's a workman-like quality to that as opposed to the, production problems that Ren and Stimpy had.
You'll get it when you get it.
Like, Doug, I would feel like if you're looking them as 3 siblings to the parent executives and Nick, they probably were telling Ren and Stimpy, like, why can't you be like Doug? Doug gets his homework done every night.
So, like I said, this is very much based on Jim's experience growing up in Richmond, Virginia. Lots of key characters in the show are based on people he knew in real life and later contacted. Like, he contacted the real-life Patty Mayonnaise and Skeeter and Roger, and they were all apparently okay with it. And the real-life Roger Klotz was like, I was bullied too. So he learned some things about his bully by doing that.
Think that would work if we made a show about our school friends? Just didn't ask their permission. Just
after
we're gonna turn our experiences into McDonald's toys. How do you feel about that?
I think you're supposed to put your enemies into all of your art to destroy them secretly.
They need to be all your enemies being killed in biblical fashion. I think Roger, if I was Roger, I'd be the most bothered by that. Of I'm the famous green mean bully now. Great.
Hey, there are nice green people in that world. Not all green people are mean.
And his mom looks exactly like him, which is very odd.
So it was a fairly popular show on Nickelodeon, and it ran for 4 seasons. And the original deal was we'll make 65, because I believe that's what Rugrats got. I think even Ren and Stimpy eventually made it to almost 65. But there was a clause in the contract saying that if you don't want to pick up all 65, we can go somewhere else. And that's how they eventually went to Disney a few years later. So that is how they were able to retain ownership. I'm not sure if they would always have ownership without that clause in the contract, but Disney said, Nickelodeon said, if we don't want to make all 65, you can go somewhere else to get these made.
That's so weird to me. They decide not to make 13 more Doug to rerun them. I mean, I guess 52. The way you rerun things on cable, 52 is enough that it can just air forever. But why not another 13? They had Snick at the time, just a new world premiere Doug. That's some good ratings there.
I also think that by the time Doug was in his twilight years on Nickelodeon, that was not the kind of show they wanted anymore for the
True.
increasingly edgy 90s.
True.
So Jumbo Pictures, which is the production studio that made Doug, they were waiting for Nick to renew them for a 5th season to finish out the 65 episodes. But the order never came, and Jenkins cites a fiscal freeze at Nickelodeon. But I feel like that could have been an excuse because they were still buying Ren and Snippy episodes.
They were making a lot of shows.
They're making a lot of stuff.
That sounds like an excuse from above. Like, oh, fiscal freeze, can't help it, Jim. Sorry.
Doug was probably the least merchandisable of those 3 shows. In fact, I think there was a Doug doll, and that was about it.
I was looking for Doug merchandise. Like I said, I wanted to wear more Doug clothes. And
You can go out and buy your own sweater vest.
see, I was not a sweater vest wearer, but I did like his cargo pants. That was their cargo shorts.
Were they cargo shorts at that point or just regular shorts?
I guess they're just big shorts.
Not
maybe.
enough pockets.
But
He had Kevin Smith style jorts.
well, that's what I liked about Doug too. That if you're a husky lad, you could project that onto him too. In one episode, he actually gets like fat in quotes and then slims down. But when he slims down, they're still like, you still kind of have a little bit of a gut. That's why
we get to see him shirtless in this episode, and he has a fairly distinct gut.
Yeah, which
That's right.
The older as you age up as a kid, you start realizing, like, oh, I'm not. This isn't baby fat anymore. It's just fat, and I feel shame.
It's kind of like on The Simpsons how every child has the pear body. Every boy has like the
Yeah.
Homer smaller pear body.
They kind of ruin that when they get to Disney's Doug, but I think we'll get to that.
Yeah, so we're at the cancellation of Doug. Let's step back a bit to go to some of the talent on the show I want to talk about. Definitely number one guy, Billy West. Billy West, he is Doug, he is Roger, he is other characters on the show. He was really taking off as a voice actor. I believe one of his first major roles was playing the sea monster in the new Beanie and Cecil show that John Kricfalusi worked on. But he was also just sitting in on Howard Stern, doing lots of fun voices. He was really taking off, but 1991 was like a major year for him with Ren and Stimpy and Doug.
Yeah, Billy West is such an interesting character. Like he has a horrible childhood, but he was raised by television as well, and he was one of these like cartoon geeks who then learned to do all these voices because he wanted to entertain an abusive parent.
Yeah.
But then he like the switch from being a dirty radio character to a voice actor was an interesting one for him. But his talent is just so immediate. Like he has so much more energy to him than so many of the voices you'd hear in 80s cartoons. Like there's just a creativity, even in a character like Doug, which is him like turned down, I think as low as he can go into vanilla. There's still a creativity to him.
Yeah, Doug is a voice I don't hear him use after Doug. It's not like Fry.
Fry's an everyman, but he has more sauce to him than Doug does.
He's also 40 and playing a 10-year-old or 11-year-old.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's important to point out.
Apparently, he could switch. Like when he did the voices of Doug, he did the voices of Roger, and usually you would record those lines separately. But apparently, he was switching freely in the recording booth, which is those are two very distinct voices, and that's very hard to do.
That's just him showing off. I feel like I saw interviews with him in the 90s where he was just like, now I'm Ren, now I'm Stimpy, now I'm Ren, now I'm Stimpy. Like he just would
very manically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, manic is the perfect word to describe Billy West. Like
he's great. And I do want to point out the woman who plays Patty Mayonnaise, Constance Schulman.
Yes.
She's got an amazing voice. And if you watch Orange is the New Black, my headcanon is Patty Mayonnaise is in jail now because she's in that series and she sounds just like Patty Mayonnaise because that's her voice.
Her voice, yeah. She's one of those. She's like the opposite of Billy West in that she's one voice, but she's awesome as that one voice. When I looked at her career, it sounded like she was like an accomplished stage actress. But then when it came time to cast her movies, they just kind of put her in like character actress roles and being like a weirdo. She originated one of the roles in Steel Magnolias, but when it's time to make the movie Steel Magnolias, you get movie stars in it. So that's just how it goes. but her voice is great. Whenever I'd hear her in anything else though, as a kid after watching Doug, it just took me out of it. I was like, oh, it's Patty Mayonnaise is here.
Is Patty Mayonnaise. Another voice actor who does all the music on the show, or most of it, is Fred Newman. He plays Skeeter and Porkchop, and he is the source of all the scatting. We haven't talked about the music on Doug yet, but it's very unique. I don't think any show has sounded like Doug before. All the sound effects are made with his mouth, and all of the music is very much feels very homemade and quaint, like banjos plucking and scatting and like spoons being played and things like that. It's very interesting.
Fred Newman's another Nickelodeon legacy performer because he was the host of Livewire between, I believe, 1981 and 1986, which was this children's talk show where Newman would bring on celebrities and musicians and industry people. There was like an episode on video games where he brought like the co-president of Midway. So yeah, he was on Nickelodeon for about half a decade, which I'm surprised that a lot of these histories don't pin Doug as the legacy show, where like Nickelodeon went back to all these people they used to work for to guarantee them a new show. I guess that just legitimately didn't factor in, but it's just fun that there's all these old hands on this show.
I mean, I only learned that by watching your videos. And you bringing up Jim Jenkins, I'm like, wow, no one has ever talked about this. It's not in his Wikipedia articles or anything like that. And same with Fred Newman. Like I would not have known this. Mostly because the shows you talked about are barely, no one has memories of them. There's barely any footage of them.
Well, and who'd ever ask them about that in an interview? They'd be like, "Oh, you remember that?" Like
let's talk about Hocus Pocus right now. So we are in 1994. It's January 94. Doug is not being picked up because Nickelodeon doesn't want more Doug, it turns out.
They at least got to have a finale. I did like the last episode of it. They graduate. They never get to see Principal Butt Savage, which is for the best. And then
it's a good name.
And then the second episode is just the family almost dying on a vacation. And
that's right.
That doesn't have as much finality as the first segment, but it still feels like, oh, this is goodbye to the Doug family if they ever, the funny family, if we ever aren't going to see him again.
I think I watched that episode when it was new, like for the first airing, and I was like, I guess Doug is over. No one told you these things in 1994. No one said, hey, Bob, this is the last episode of the series. Nickelodeon didn't want you to know that for sure. But I was like, is Doug over?
Is this I've had that feeling with a few shows where they didn't advertise them, even though you'd get bigger ratings, but I guess they figured kids don't care if it's the last episode, the first episode. And then you just left with this odd sense of unknowing of like, did I watch this? Are there no more new ones? Is the City of Gold over? Because they just left it.
It turns out Doug was not over, Henry.
Oh.
Because I remember, because there was no real internet back then. You weren't reading about cartoons online like you are now. You weren't listening to podcasts like you are now. And I remember...
Dark time.
What's that? It was a dark time. And I remember in 1996, maybe the spring or the summer, reading Entertainment Weekly, Doug is coming back. Doug is coming back thanks to Disney. And at this time, Disney saw the Nicktoons, saw how huge they were. They were doing fine with Disney Afternoon, but they wanted the cool cartoon heat that Nickelodeon had. So they basically got Rugrats people to make Recess, and they got Doug on ABC. The series Doug.
Yeah.
All new episodes of Doug.
That was a real talent theft by them there. That Disney's One Saturday Morning, I was a Saturday morning junkie, as I was just watching all television, but my favorite as a kid in the 80s was CBS because it was anchored by Muppet Babies. And I really looked down on like NBC and ABC. I didn't like them as much. Then when Fox came in, that took over. And CBS like was second. ABC was like nothing to me. I didn't really like their things. So when they Disney-fied it and made it all like they went so hard on promotion for it, I did have to check it out. Also because they had Gargoyles, so I followed Gargoyles to it. And then when I saw Doug was on there, I was there for the first few episodes.
Me too.
But things didn't feel right.
I think I realized I had outgrown Doug. But first, it was called Brand Spanking New Doug at first. Then it was called Disney's Doug. I think in 1996, that was necessary because if you told people Doug was on TV, oh, that old show.
Bunch of reruns of Doug. I ain't watching this.
So they had to let you know Doug is new. Doug, there's been a Naruto-style time skip. Doug is now a year older. Some status quo things have changed. Roger is now a millionaire.
A lot of status quo changes,
So many that I forget. And actually, I've seen precious little of the new Doug, new meaning, over 20 years old. But there are more episodes of that than there are of the Nickelodeon Doug. There are 65 episodes of Disney's Doug.
That saddens me. That because Disney they got the rights to Doug, but they didn't own old Doug.
Yeah.
So they just if they were going to run it endlessly, then they needed the same 65 episode count that like DuckTales and all the others had.
Yeah, sorry. I remember this being a pretty big deal among my schoolmates who didn't have cable, because it felt like one of these forbidden cable fruits is finally available to them. It's like, I mean, yeah, if you want to count Doug as a forbidden cable fruit, not Ren Stimpy. But yeah, they did a lot of changes, and I think probably I appreciate Disney's Doug more than I like it. I appreciate that they acknowledge the passing of time, which is not a common thing among children's media. And some of the changes they made, I'm okay with. One of the secondary characters, Connie, she, in the original Nickelodeon Doug, she was this kind of sweet, heavyset girl. And between Nickelodeon's Doug and Disney's Doug, they send her to a beauty camp.
Yes.
Oh, no.
She gets thin. Her hair changes, and everyone's like, the ugly duckling became a beautiful swan. It's like, oh, this is kind of gross. Even then, I was like, really?
Yeah, I felt like they tried to put a positive spin on it. I was actually going to bring up Connie as well, because I appreciated more seeing her now as like a full-bodied girl that people were not like nobody makes fat jokes about her or anything. Like, she's not made to feel less of a person. And I kind of wish they didn't unchange her just from like a diversity standpoint. It just like you needed there's not a very body diverse group of the girls on the show without Connie. Well, the other changes too, like since they graduated Doug in the finale, Nick, then they had to move him to middle school. And so Mrs. Wingo isn't there either.
Is Mr. Bone there?
Bone does transfer
Okay.
over to it's also the BB Bluff Middle School, because the father built it for her and it's shaped
okay.
like her head. And the old mayor Bob White becomes the principal there, so you actually see the principal.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was something they did change things occasionally on, even the Nick ones. Like the mayor, vote for me, he lost to Miss Dink in the fourth season. He was no longer the mayor anymore.
That's right.
And I think, honestly, there's a very Ralph Wiggum moment of revealing that one of the characters in Roger's gang is the mayor's son in the fourth season too. Very similar to Ralph. Oh, Ralph Wiggum is the police chief's son.
Wow, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, for me, where I was in life, at 9, I wanted to watch Doug. I was ready for that kind of a show. At 14, a lot happens to you between 9 and 14. I was into The Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy and every edgy, cool teen thing. And I wanted to give Doug a shot, but I just felt like, boy, I'm used to something a little more intense than this. This Disney's Doug.
And also, the thing that hurt it for me was that it was airing next to Pepper Ann, which is basically just Doug, too. It just felt redundant.
I liked Pepper Ann. Actually, I watched Pepper Ann more than Disney's Doug.
Well, at least it was fresh, you know.
And they had an episode about her getting her period, and I was like, am I watching this?
And a training bra episode, too, which I was like, this isn't for boys.
Which I think that's something we have to appreciate about Doug as a whole, is that it really opened the door for these young person comedy drama series. Like the other two Nicktoons, Ren and Stimpy was definitely, I'm not saying they're not unique, but Ren and Stimpy had kind of some stuff building up to it, like the Mighty Mouse cartoon, and also kind of a Looney Tunes influence on that. Mm-hmm. And Rugrats, a ton of fun, but I'm not sure it would have been greenlit if like Muppet Babies hadn't been a huge success.
Yeah, or The Simpsons for sure.
Or The Simpsons. There's not much prior to Doug you can compare to Doug 2, except maybe Peanuts.
Yeah, it's kind of an aged up Peanuts, but Peanuts was never a regular TV show. Just had
Yeah.
a lot of movies. But you're totally right. Like for as sort of lame and tepid as Doug seems now, and I'm saying that in the kindest way, I feel like there was nothing like it, and it opened the door for more of these slice of life. Normal everyday kid shows where you don't have to have adventures as much. You can just sort of depict the kid's life.
Yeah, Hey Arnold, As Told by Ginger, Recess, Pepper Ann, Braceface, shows like that.
The Weekenders.
Weekenders.
Yeah, I guess it is a lot more special in that way. But the show, like you said, like a naive quality or just like a quietness to it that makes it not really stand out. Like it's kind of intentionally plain, so it recedes into your memory. Even though it had like there's a Doug movie released theatrically, not even just on video.
The series wrapped with 1999's Doug's first movie. So exactly 20 years ago, almost. It launched in April of 97, so we're almost 20 years from the Doug finale.
I didn't see it, but as I believe it happens, the nematode is real. Doug finally actually catches the nematode.
The monsters are real.
That's a real change for the show. Like it is, there's no real Doug's fantasy world and reality are very different. So to have the nematode be real is quite a shift. I mean, that's the kind of shift you make
That's
for
the
a movie.
movie scope of Doug. I guess that's the way to go out, is to make monsters real in the series. Although, was it all just a mean old Mr. Jenkins? I don't know. I've never watched the movie.
Supposedly, Jim Jenkins wrote a script for a second movie many years later that would have had Doug and Skeeter college aged.
Huh.
Interesting.
But since Disney owned the rights to the character at that point and they didn't really want to do anything with it, that never went anywhere.
Yeah, I think Disney owning Doug now is why we'll never see Doug appear again in anything. No fun reboot series, because Disney's like, we own Star Wars, so I don't want to make more Doug. What are we doing?
Everything takes a backseat to Star Wars.
Yeah.
I feel like every What a Cartoon, or I feel like half of the What a Cartoons we mentioned, well, on the Disney streaming service, who knows if it'll show up there. Like, it's because Disney owns fucking everything.
Yeah. I mean, put Doug in Kingdom Hearts 4, make him a summon. I mean, you can make a joke about anything now because Disney owns everything, but why not have a Doug world? We're buying those games.
You know, he's not very merchandisable. We talked about that because his hair, like, how do you make that as a toy?
Boy, I've never seen a 3D Doug doll.
The Doug doll, it's like a bald, like Charlie Brown head with like the hair squiggles drawn on.
Oh, that's terrible.
It wasn't great.
My brother had a Tommy Pickles toy, and at least that it was dots of hair, like almost like kind of plastic studs coming out of Tommy's head there. Oh yeah, then Jim Jenkins. We talked about Jim Jenkins' later career on that Millhouse Divided episode of Talking Simpsons for some reason.
Right. Yeah, so Jumbo Pictures would go on to create more things. They would even work on the 101 Dalmatians TV series for Disney. They would produce that as well, so not just their own properties.
I wonder if kids remember his Otter Show more. If the Otter Show is remembered more than Doug is.
PB and J Otter.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the eldest of 5 siblings, and it was spaced out in such a way that there was always like preschool and little kids shows air on TV till like 2004. And I can say with certainty that my little sisters were way more into PB&J Otter than I was into Doug as a kid. I'm surprised. I was looking at his credits. I was surprised how many shows I absorbed through that osmosis that I didn't even know was Jim Jenkins. I didn't know Jim Jenkins was the 101 Dalmatians guy. I didn't know he was the PB&J Otter guy. What else? I didn't know he was the Stanley guy or the JoJo Circus guy.
Oh yeah, Disney put him to work. They didn't, when they bought another. What does Disney need? A Jumbo Pictures animation studio. They got all the ones they need, but they put him to work and got a lot of stuff out of it. I was shocked to find out that 101 Dalmatians spinoff show was by him, because I just figured to keep that more internal and give it to, Walt Disney Australia or Walt Disney Japan.
Yeah, Disney closed Jumbo Pictures in 2001, and then he made something called Cartoon Pizza, his new production studio, but he kept making things for Disney. So it's just like, why did you close the production studio just to keep making things for Disney?
Yeah, it was basically the same. It was just a name change for the company.
Yeah.
Maybe that was
David Campbell was still involved.
Maybe that was just to end contracts or something.
Yeah, probably some legal thing that we don't know about. But Jenkins has said he knows people don't like the Disney's Doug as much. And he says that, like, all of the problems, all the changes are from me. Like, I wanted all these changes. There was no network decision to make all the changes.
It's
they were
nice
all
of him
from
to take
me.
the blame, but
Yeah.
wouldn't you do that if you didn't want to piss off Disney? You'd say they're all my fault.
I want to believe that he had, he was had a big picture thing in mind for Doug. But I was reading Constance Schulman was not as happy with the Disney series as well. She was saying the spark wasn't there in the voice recordings. I believe Jenkins stepped back from directing the voices in those seasons. So she said it wasn't
Billy
as
West was
fun.
gone?
Yeah, Billy
No
West was
Billy
gone. We
West.
totally forgot about Billy West. Yeah, Billy West. Jenkins, again, this is all Jenkins' own story, but he claims that he fought for Billy. I think it was Disney playing hardball and Billy's star rising and Billy knowing what he was worth. And ultimately, according to Billy West, they had to pay more to replace him because they had to hire more than one actor to fill his roles.
I could see Disney playing hardball like that based on just anecdotal evidence of hearing how they play hardball with voice actors or whenever. So this was a story of when the Muppets got bought by Disney, that there was a lot of friction caused by Muppet actors feeling a certain ownership over their Muppets, while Disney executives feeling more like it's a voice. A voice is a voice. If these people are difficult, yet get another voice.
They fired Kermit.
And Billy didn't. This is just through memory, but I don't think Billy did a ton of Disney work. Like he was the voice of Bugs Bunny a lot more than he was of any
That's
Disney
true,
characters.
yeah.
So maybe in the small world of voice acting, maybe somebody on the Disney side of things just didn't like Billy West and didn't want to cast him. These are all rumors I'm spreading here on this podcast.
But according to Billy and according to Jim, it was a money thing.
Yeah, I mean, money makes sense.
Yeah.
Voice actors get paid shit. They work hard to get paid better.
I have to assume that Billy was making not a lot of money from his initial Nicktoons contracts, and now in '96, he's like, I am Billy West. I'm the voice of Ren and Stimpy. I'm the voice of the original Doug. I make a lot of money now. Pay
He's
me
Bugs
money.
Bunny in Space Jam.
Yeah, he'll be Bugs Bunny in a year from the start of Disney's Doug. So yeah. So any final thoughts on Doug before we get into the episodes? Again, it's all on Hulu. The Disney stuff, the Nickelodeon stuff is on Hulu. Disney stuff, who knows where it is? It's probably all on YouTube. I'm just gonna guess it all is.
I don't know if all of it, but a good chunk of it is.
Yeah, that's usually where a lot of Disney TV shows end up because they're not watching.
Yeah. It's pretty much every Disney short is on there that I was looking for our Goofy movie subject.
Oh, you're right.
Too.
Yeah.
They as I look back on Doug, I think I made fun of Doug in previous episodes just because I feel ashamed of liking it as much, or it's like how you'd be, embarrassed by a childhood picture of you. Like you're like, well, that's not me anymore. I'm more grown up than Doug now. But this rekindled a bunch of nice, happy memories of Doug. When I rewatched about like 5 or 6 episodes beyond the ones we did for this just to prepare, and as I was watching, I was like, oh, I remember. Okay, and then this happens and this happens. Like here's the next scene. Like there were some sweet, and like the Christmas special episodes of it. They actually, when they would go to pull your heartstrings, they usually would work. Like when Doug was worried his dog is about to be put down, I was like, no, not poor child. Even though I was like 12 or 13 by that point. I should have known they're not going to kill a dog.
Yeah.
On the show.
Don't go there.
One last thing, because it's not relevant to the episode we're covering, that I think we should bring up are the beats.
Oh, yes. Actually, we're going to go out with Killer Tofu. Let's talk about the Beats, though. So the favorite band of Doug and the kids in the show is the Beats. And there's actually like 3 or 4 full songs you can find on YouTube that are from the show. I have to assume there was some sort of soundtrack release, perhaps given away in a cereal box at some point. But dear God, Killer Tofu is a total jam. I was listening to Killer Tofu on the walk over here. I'm not ashamed of myself. It's a cool song.
Yeah.
The riffs are cool. There's a cool solo in it.
I like that they have their own energy to them. They could have just been a Beatles parody because that's where they're beginning, but they have their own sound that is definitely a very 90s or late 80s.
I'd say it's more of like a jangly 80s, maybe a little heavier than that sometimes too. Yeah.
The rest of the show is very quaint, but the music is just badass.
Yeah.
And it's a weird contrast that I love.
I think Killer Tofu is the best song, but I also do love I Need More Allowance.
I Need
with
More
the
Allowance.
yodeling. That's pretty great
There's
too.
Where's My Sock, I think.
I also the first episode about the Beats is it did mean a lot to me as a kid because I got obsessed, as I still do. I get obsessed about things. I want to learn every single thing about it. That's what Doug does once he learns about the existence of the Beats. He's like, I have to know every single thing about the Beats. I have to win a Beats contest on the radio. Like, I am the biggest Beats fan in the world. Like, that's there's many things on Doug that's identifiable there, and like for me.
So we're going to go out with Killer Tofu. When we come back, we'll talk about the 2 episodes in question, Doug Takes the Case and Doug's Secret Song. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the What a Cartoon Break. I am one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. I love the song Killer Tofu, but I love actual tofu. It's very delicious. That song's incorrect. I will eat that strange bean curd. How about you, Henry? Oh, no, I gave it away.
Hey, it's Henry, and I'm fresh out of the Honker Burger.
Oh, Honker Burger, that was an institution in Bluffington.
Yeah, this was a really fun episode talking about Doug. We finally completed our Nicktoons Originals chat here, and I'm really happy that we were able to get on Pop Arena. Or Greg of Pop Arena, I should say.
Pop Arena is fantastic. Check it out on YouTube. He's got a Patreon too. We fully endorse his videos. He does a lot of great work. But as for us, if you want to support our show and get every episode a week in advance and ad-free, please go to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons and join the Talking Simpsons Network. For the incredibly low price of $5 a month, you can get in on our bonus tier of podcasts. Along with getting the podcast in advance, you'll also get tons of bonus podcasts like Talking Critic, Talking Futurama. Those exclusive series will never leave Patreon. Also, you'll get Talk King of the Hill very soon. It's starting on March 15th. We're doing the entire first season of King of the Hill, and the first episode is on the Talking Simpsons feed if you want to hear it for free.
And you'll get a new one each week. So that's a third regular weekly podcast from me and Bob for the next 3 months. All you got to do is be a subscriber at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons for just $5 a month. Plus, you'll get access to all of our amazing interviews with so many Simpsons veterans. I think we're almost up to 20 now, talking to folks who have been working on the show almost from the beginning, in some cases since Tracy Ullman.
Also, we have a new $10 tier. Previously, that was our video tier. If you subscribe to that $10 tier, you'll get all of those videos we produced up until that point, and then we changed it over to a movie podcast, the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, and they've all been fantastic. Once a month, we do an entire podcast about a cartoon movie that our patrons vote on, and they are very, very long podcasts, but every minute is worth it. No minute goes to waste. And our recent one about a Goofy movie was our longest podcast yet at 3 hours, not 2 hours, 3 hours and 28 minutes. That'll get you through a work day.
Yes, it's 3 times as long as that somewhat short film, but we have so much to say about a Goofy movie, just like we did with Akira, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And this month, it's going to be a Don Bluth film as voted on by our audience on patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. It's a premium podcast, but we make it worth it. Me and Bob work really hard to get your money's worth out of it. This is me and Bob's full-time job, supported by the wonderful folks at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. So I would encourage any and all of you to help us keep doing this right.
And if you're new to the network and never signed up before, you have a bounty of podcasts waiting for you, and listening to them is so easy. You either use the Patreon app, which is great, or you just get a little code that we will give you, drop that into your podcast player of choice, and it will download our bonus episodes alongside your normal podcast. So it's very easy to integrate us into your life.
Listen to us at all times. You must. We command it. But yes, no, you get, even at the $1 level, you'll be able to hear our monthly community podcast where we talk about our favorite comments that we find during the month. That's all at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons.
Thanks for listening to The Break. We'll let you get back to Doug's crimes and his secret love. Check it out, everybody.
This Sunday, why face the nation when you can face the animation? Nickelodeon's new cartoons are stimulating and tasty. Think of them as cartoon coffee. They're Doug, Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, and they'll never discuss foreign policy. The TV generation knows you can never outgrow good cartoons. So watch Nicktoons this Sunday starting at 10, 9 Central only on Nickelodeon.
The first episode we're doing today is Doug Takes the Case. It's one of two segments from an episode that aired on September 13th, 1992. So basically the second season of Doug, the first episode of the second season.
Yeah, it's the second season premiere. It's I'm glad we're starting with this one because it lets us like see where they were when they were finding their feet after the first season. Like, this is what we like about Doug. This is what we don't like. This is what we want to like do more of. And also building out, like, there's a couple first appearances in here too that help build out the world of Bluffington more too.
There's a few first and only appearances too.
Yes. Yeah.
I like the second episode a bit more. It's the one I remember more, but this one has like a lot of your typical Doug stuff, like him figuring things out through an alter ego and everything working out in the end being a big misunderstanding.
I'm glad we get a Doug persona episode in here, and one of the lesser ones. I mean, you know, Quail Man's the most famous one, but I think it's kind of fun to just have a one-off appearance that's pretty much just built on Billy West's ability to imitate Peter Falk.
It's a weird character. So this episode opens with a character called the Chameleon, which is Doug's alter ego. He is a shapeshifter, but also Columbo. It's a fun idea, but very, very mixed up, I think.
The shapeshifting stuff is front-loaded in it, and then he kind of forgets that he can shapeshift, and he's just like, now I'm just Columbo.
He tries it once in real life. It doesn't really work out. But we see a montage of the Chameleon doing all of his stuff, and then we learn that BB Bluff, her radio was stolen during the day. By 4 p.m. it was gone, and no one knows what happens to it. And her dad is lecturing the class. Let's hear that.
Now, Mr. Bluff, I know you need that radio back, but need? I don't need anything. I'm rich. I can buy 1 million of them, but it's the principle of the thing. Stand aside, Mr. Bluff. I'll handle this. All right, you little hoodlums, get this and get this straight. If that radio isn't back here by 1600 hours today, we're all going to stay in detention after school. There you go.
Oh, Doug, this is terrible. I have b-ball practice this afternoon. There's no way I can miss it.
Oh, don't worry, Patty. I'm sure whoever took Mr. Bluff's radio is going to return it.
I hope so.
I hated to see this kid's heart broken. Her beatball practice trashed by some small-time hood. Luckily, she had turned to me. The Chameleon, master of disguise, feared by criminals everywhere. I decided I was going to find out who took BB's radio. In fact, I already had an idea who might have taken it.
He thinks it's Roger Klotz.
That's a very like profiling thing there, Doug. You need to...
I forgot that Roger Klotz has an unofficial gang.
Yes.
He mentions his gang twice. I'm like, wow. Like, which is he? The Crips or the Bloods, or what's going on? Like, who's he affiliated with? But yes, the Chameleon is very much a Columbo impression, which was lost on me as a kid.
Me too. I like Billy West. It's a real like Billy West idiosyncrasy where he's like, shh, like he brings extra syllables to the S's that at first sounds like a screw up, but is actually intentionally there just to imitate Peter Falk doing the character.
And it sounds a bit like he's being pitched up, but he's not. He actually just did the voice of Doug recently on a podcast appearance, and it sounds perfect. It was just perfect Doug, and he's in his 60s, so he can come back and play Doug if he wants to.
More Doug now.
Yeah.
Okay, when you know the twist or you know the secret, and you see how BB and Skeeter react to the missing stereo, you're like, well, you guys are really going all in on this act. You're like, we have to act like it was stolen, Skeeter.
I know, and they're willing to have the entire class punished for this.
It's
Why is BB in detention?
Yeah,
her radio
wait a
gets stolen.
minute.
Yeah.
She shouldn't be there.
This has some story problems, number one.
I mean, it does follow the typical, film noir. There's even some very like film noir kind of moments in this episode. And also one of the many detective stories has ended with, it was all a fake. It was my client was the criminal, and it was all the femme fatale was tricking me, that kind of thing. So
I think there should be higher stakes than Patty missing sports practice, though. Like,
well, I do. Okay, yes, but as a kid, little things like that all feel like the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like you can't see beyond one afternoon. So I kind of, it's a typical Doug thing to make mountains out of molehills for everything. And so even for me missing beach ball practice, which is basically softball, I've kinda, which I like that Patty's super sporty too. That's a nice extra characteristic to her.
Doug thinks Roger is the culprit because obviously,
yeah, it's what the children watching at home are like. Well, it's Roger. Like from a story point, they need to get Roger out of the way so it can be more interesting than just him.
He's kind of profiling Roger, though, based on past behavior, I guess. But he has a fun little fantasy. A lot of his fantasies are just visual, so I didn't capture a lot of the audio
getting
for them.
Roger. Often his fantasies are getting revenge on Roger.
He's kind of fixated on revenge, isn't he? But he goes undercover as a locker and busts Roger in this fantasy as the chameleon.
My favorite of his costumes is a brick wall. I like that's the one in silhouette that they animate running. Like,
yeah.
it's so dumb looking.
And there are bricks falling off of him.
He's not even like calling out to the bad guy like, "Hey, stop!" He looks like a creepy pasta monster coming after this
That
guy.
is true. It's kind of unsettling.
You're the real monster here, Doug. Like, you're also not a cop, unlike Columbo. Like, you can't just chase people.
He's deputized himself.
Oh, that's the first appearance of Bill Bluff there, BB's father.
Oh, okay, first appearance. Wow.
It's he is the famously if you're going to make up a fictional town, you need a rich jerk. You need to have a rich jerk archetype.
And the town is named after his family, I take it? I totally forget.
The Bluffington is their town. Like, that's partially why they're old money. That's that's a plot point in Disney's Doug, that they're old money while Roger is new money.
You're right. I know in the history, I forgot to mention that Jim Jenkins worked out like the founding of Bluffington and stuff in his pitch, like in his idea for creating the town and the characters. He worked out very specific details like that.
He put a lot of detail into Bluffington. He even made like full maps of the city. I found some in some art books a while ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
I was wondering,
that's impressive.
Are they just like generic animation art books, or is it like the art of Disney's Doug?
I don't remember what specific book it was in. I'll have to look that up.
It's cool to know they're out there, though.
But there's no like official Doug art book, no.
It does. Rewatching this too, it made me laugh hearing of Assistant Principal Bone again, of just like he's just Don Knotts.
It's a funny voice, though. It's a real. I enjoy it.
Well, it's even not just plain Don Knotts. It's him in the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah.
Like,
it sounds more like Dana Gould's impression of him, actually. So Doug checks in with Skeeter, and Skeeter points out that, Roger was in the principal's office all day. Therefore, he couldn't have stolen the boombox. And so he talks to
Skeeter's
BB.
always smarter than Doug, man.
That's
his
true.
thing. Statistically, that will be proven to Doug later, I think, in this season.
He's like a super genius, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think that's why Skeeter can sometimes seem airbrained in the show, because it was the easy joke of like, oh, Doug's smarter than Skeeter. So when you find out that Skeeter's actually a super genius, that's why he just can't focus on. He's looking at the big picture.
He's playing 4D chess. That's Skeeter. So Doug checks in with BB.
Oh, it's too embarrassing. Daddy just overreacted, that's all. Just do me a favor, Doug, and forget about it. I'm sure whoever did it will turn it in.
But what happens if we all have to stay in detention?
Well, there are worse things, like a bad haircut, for instance.
That may have been good enough for her, but I had a little lady, see, who was going to miss her beatball practice if I didn't crack this case. Oh, BB, I am sorry to bother you, ma'am, but my memory's a little rusty. Who is it who sits behind you in class?
Boomer, of course.
That was it. Unknowingly, she'd just given me the information I was looking for.
I forget, is Boomer one of Roger's associates? Like Boomer and Stinky were his two buddies?
Boomer, Stinky, and Bob White's son.
Okay.
Too. Yeah. I like how they play her in this scene of the exposition, because she's I got a real Norma Desmond vibe from her,
Yeah.
like with her glasses and her sunglasses and her butler and being out of touch with reality. Like that's it should be illegal to bring your butler to school, but it seems like they make a lot of exceptions for the bluffs at this school.
They let the dad establish punishments
Yes,
for all the children.
yeah.
And this is a scene with the most direct Columbo reference there.
Yeah.
He does the
One
full
more thing.
turn.
The one
Yeah.
more thing, ma'am, sort of thing. Is that what he did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't watch much Columbo as a kid. I was more into Law and Order, though. That was my show.
Columbo was Grandpa's show.
Yeah, it was like, and it was paired with Murder She Wrote, the Grandma Show. Like, and now they're just nice shows. I do watching them in reruns. Like they're easy Netflix viewing. I'm just like, I'll just put this on.
I hear
and,
Columbo is awesome.
and I'll lull
Columbo's
myself
really
to
good.
sleep. Yeah. And wouldn't it be nice to just like get into Columbo and have 800 episodes of something to watch?
Thinking about it for my retirement. So Doug starts tailing Boomer Bledsoe, and he tries to do his chameleon thing in real life. It doesn't quite work out. He's hiding behind a coat rack. He's making himself very obvious. And Boomer's asking him to help him carry books because he's carrying quite a few books.
Boomer should be kind of pissed off. He's like, why are you stalking me? What's going on here? And also a poorly designed school that there's just like a dead end of lockers.
Feels like a fire escape issue.
And poorly cleaned school as well, because right after that, Doug finds a chunk of BB's radio right down the floor.
that
That's
no one
true.
else saw, this purple thing in the middle of the floor.
A very obvious chunk of a giant boombox. I remember
It's the size of a wallet.
it's huge. You could trip over it. And this brought me back to the era of those giant boomboxes that would have like 2 tape decks and a CD player and all kinds of stuff all over them. They were just gigantic.
I loved my big boombox because I could tape my I could make mixtapes of my CDs because I certainly didn't have a personal CD player. But so you
Oh.
got to tape your CDs onto the tape and then listen to the tape at school.
I'm not a millionaire, Henry. I can't do that.
I had also forgot that Boomer's played by Billy West too. He's like,
Yeah.
every time they need a new voice, I think they are like, Billy, you can do one more character in this episode. Can you do it?
It's like 50% of the voices are Billy West, 35% of them are Fred Newman, and
The
There
rest
are
are children.
2 women.
Yeah, 2 women. Yeah. No, they really, just watching these, you really see how much they lost in losing Billy West on Disney's Doug. Like, I mean, when he's the lead actor and the bully, like and then every stock character, like you just lose a lot in losing that Doug.
You get that natural Billy West energy that no one else has, too.
Yeah. I also forgot that Boomer's just drawn to wear a Star Trek shirt. Like
Oh, you're
he's-
right. I forgot about that.
Though that's speaking of Law and Order, it's important in Law and Order to give a character business while they give clues, because if they just stand still and go like, "Well, here's your next clue," that's boring.
They have to be cutting an onion
Yeah.
or juggling.
Yeah, and that's what Boomer's doing. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm holding all these books. It's fun animation on his all the different ways he holds his books. And this is, I think, the most Boomer ever talks in the series. He has no character. The other two get more of a character.
That's true.
But Boomer, I also think it's kind of mean of Doug to be like, he's short on brains. Though, I mean, Boomer does help bully him all the time, so I don't blame Doug.
He's allowed to make fun of him. So they find the piece of the radio. It's in front of locker 164, and that's right next to Skeeter's locker. And so Doug goes to the metal shop to question Skeeter, and he finds Skeeter with the radio.
Oh no, it was Skeeter. I couldn't believe it. My best friend stole BB's radio. Was he really gonna try and get away with it? And what would I do if he did?
I need a bus ticket.
Why, to where, young man?
Well, how far can I get on this?
Elm Street.
I'll take it.
Reserved for Skeeter.
Oh, wow.
Leisure trip, mosquito?
Chameleon. Wait, I can explain. I can.
Yeah, tell it to the judge, pal.
You can't do it to me, man. You can't turn in your best friend. It's the rule. Oh, no. Please, Chameleon.
But could I really turn in Skeeter? I waited for him outside of class.
So there's a new crisis of conscience in this episode.
It's a clever twist to make it a Skeeter. Like that's instead of one of the many troublemakers of the school. Like now Doug has to make the moral choice of like, do I turn in my friend or not?
But if the entire class is being punished, he should really be more discreet, Skeeter.
Yeah.
Than just sitting in the unlocked metal shop with it right out in the open.
Yes, Skeeter's not. I mean, he's not a good troublemaker. Roger would have known to cover his tracks a lot better, I think. Yeah, that's also why you know it's not. Well, so now that you know that Skeeter knows and he's trying to throw Doug off, like it's actually kind of good that Skeeter's like, no, it couldn't be Roger because he doesn't want. He knows who he's guilty, so he's getting Doug off the scent of Roger to leave Roger alone.
And in that clip, you couldn't see it, but Doug was disguised as a easy chair, and Skeeter sat down in him, and he was captured.
It speaks to Doug's opinion of his friend Skeeter's intelligence that he thinks Skeeter would fall for this easy chair in the middle of a train station is reserved for Skeeter.
Yeah, that he trusts that. Like, yeah, that I like that better in the later episode than that you see Doug just assumed he was better than Skeeter or smarter. So it kind of destroys him when he finds out that Skeeter's actually smarter than he is.
Doug is making a lot of assumptions about people in this episode, I have to say.
That's not a lesson he learns. That should maybe be a little bit of the moral in this of like, don't make assumptions about people or don't also think anyone in your class can be a criminal.
But they never really cover that part of the moral.
No, yeah, pretty light on that one. But I also do like the desperate Skeeter design, like with his,
5 o'clock shadow.
5 o'clock shadow, his kind of like homeless man outfit. He's like, I got to get out of town. It's a cute design.
So Doug kind of confronts Skeeter. He's sort of asking him, should I turn in my best friend, someone who's not me, turn in their best friend rather for something they did, they get in trouble. And Skeeter, I think he knows that Doug knows.
But he's playing dumb.
Yeah. And thankfully he's literally saved by the bell. The bell rings, Skeeter gets to escape. And the nice Mrs. Wingo has a way to get everybody off the hook. She says she'll turn the lights off. And the culprit can put the radio back on her desk and no one will ever know. That's a very dark school.
This is some blinder curtains or something.
Yeah, some blackout curtains.
She does take her time closing every window blind as she's explaining it. So it's not completely out of left field, but yeah, it's still, you can close every blind in a classroom. I mean, there's glass on the front door, like it would come through, but it's good to have, cartoons need blackout gags of floating eyes.
Floating eyes are always great. So the lights go out. Presumably, Doug grabs the radio from Skeeter's possessions, I'm guessing.
I think Miss Wingo knows Skeeter did it too because he has a giant backpack clearly full of a thing shaped like the speaker as she walks by. So I think she's like giving Skeeter one last chance to put it on the table there.
So Roger turns the light on and we learn the truth about the radio.
Was I going to squeal on Skeeter or was I going to take the rap for him?
Doug didn't take my radio, Mrs. Wingo.
What?
Skeeter had my radio.
Then it was Skeeter who took it?
No, it fell out of my locker. Skeeter was trying to fix it for me.
Oh, I get it. So when your father asked where it was...
I knew he'd freak out, so I told him somebody took it. I never thought it would blow up into such a big deal. I'm sorry. I panicked.
Well, we're all glad that's over with, BB. You can all go now.
Let's go!
Too bad, Funny. I was just about to ask you to join my gang, too.
Oh, no, Mr. Klotz. There's still the little matter of the stinky cheese on the radiator.
Roger is punished for a crime that we don't see yet. BB gets off the hook.
Yeah.
That bothered me. The entire school should hate her, or class rather.
Well, Miss Wingo should know that she'd never get away with punishing BB.
Oh, she's rich. That's right.
Yeah. Well,
so it's a good lesson to learn about the real world.
Yes,
if you're rich, you won't be punished.
And as we all know, all victims lie about their crimes. That's too. No,
is that what Doug is teaching us?
Yeah. Yeah. At least she admits it. Like, she's not a completely amoral rich girl, I think, but she's a very privileged person.
Yeah.
Though this kind of coupling of BB and Skeeter, this would grow into them being a real couple, I think more in Disney's Doug. Though Skeeter got around, he also dated that one girl who, Yeah, wait, there's a whole episode where Doug is like, Skeeter, your girlfriend's a liar. Was the whole plot of it. Remember that one?
Was that on Disney or Nickelodeon?
That was on Nick.
Oh, I don't remember that one. I know I've seen it like 80 times, though, but I don't remember it.
So what does Doug learn?
I don't know. See, my issue with this episode and the next one, and I think it's a recurring issue with the series, is that Doug is upset about something, rightfully so, given what he knows about the situation. And yet at the end, there's some deus ex machina that is like, well, you never had to worry about it to begin with, Doug. And it's like, what a relief. Like, that's my issue with this series, kind of. It's like, it's unrealistic to have a show that moralizes when the solution is just like, oh, there was never a problem.
Well, I do think a running theme in Doug is that things aren't as bad as you think they are.
I had that idea too.
And that Doug overthinks everything. That's the message I took from it too as a kid. Like, the thing I most identified with Doug is that I worried about everything all the time. Any choice I made was something to worry about. And so Doug worrying about things or assuming that the worst possible thing is going to happen. That's how I felt as a kid too, like over little things. So, you know, in that way, it's a good. I like that message.
I can kind of see that a bit. Like, don't worry so much, kids. It's going to be okay. But many times it's not okay. And also, the things that save Doug are very unlikely events to happen to him. Like, he is saved by very outlandish events, especially in the next episode. Like,
the lesson here should have been, maybe don't pry into other people's life. Like, this isn't your problem, Doug?
Everything would have been fine if you did nothing, Doug.
Yeah. You accomplished nothing.
I guess so. Yeah, Doug didn't have to do anything for these events to play out.
You pestered a few people.
Yeah, it might have been better if he learned the lesson of like leave people alone or mind your own business a little bit.
Well, apparently he's going to be stalked by Porkchop for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
as the final scene indicates.
So Porkchop is magic. Like he can do.
Yeah.
I mean, Porkchop instantly, like he doesn't grow like Garfield into. Garfield is a child in a cat costume, but he doesn't begin that way. Porkchop begins as a man in a dog.
Yeah,
costume.
he's got human intelligence, which is
Porkchop
why
is if Snoopy was rich.
Oh yeah, and had lots Porkchop had lots of gadgets, right? In the series? Yeah.
He has a pretty awesome igloo house. Like Porkchop is Porkchop is about the age of Doug. Like they show that he got Doug got Porkchop when he was like 1 or 2.
He's a senior dog.
He's a senior dog, but he's got the actions of like a puppy in these.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually something when I read about that second movie script Jim Jenkins did. He mentioned, oh yeah, and Porkchop would be in that second movie, even though they're college age. Don't think about it.
Yeah,
I thought it was going to be Doug's second movie, Porkchop's last movie.
Well, yeah, that's something that Toy Story had to get around, where they're like when they aged up Andy, they had to show you like his the dog that they get at the end of the first movie. The dog's still alive, but he's quite old.
He ain't making it to Toy Story 4.
That's why they got to move him out of that Andy's house and be with the new kids, so you don't have to talk about the dog dying.
Let's not talk about the dog.
You ever think about the fact that every dog that existed when you were born is gone?
Yes, every dog that existed when I was a teen, in my early 20s.
Ooh, that's
all dead.
Yeah, it's a friend of ours who's been on this show before, Dave Rudden. He has his joke is if we're watching anything live action together, and that is from old enough ago, he says like, "Oh, that dog's dead." Like anytime a dog appears on screen, he's just like, "That dog's dead."
That's why I bought a parrot, an immortal pet. He will live forever and be buried with me.
You shall be buried with me.
Let's move on to Doug's secret song, and here is the very first scene where we hear that secret song.
Well, I'm not much of a songwriter, but when I'm thinking about Patty, well, sometimes a song just comes out. Like this one I was working on today. Patty, you're the pickle on my coleslaw. Patty, you're the sugar in my tea. Patty, you're the relish on my hot dog. And Patty, you're the mayonnaise for me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Patty, I worked on it for hours. It was my secret song. Well, no one would ever hear it but me.
Hey, great tune, Doug. Skeeter. Love the whoa, 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 whoa.
So I remember this one the best. In fact, I don't know if you chose this one or I chose this one, but like immediately when one of us said it, was like, oh yeah, I know the song, I know what this one's about, I know the twist at the end.
This was high on my list of ones I'd want to do just because, I definitely remembered. I remembered every step of this one. I think so. The Doug's crush stuff. I mean, was this identifiable to us as kids who had crushes as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't start having like real crushes until I would say 6th or 7th grade, like long after like Doug was over, kind of. But yeah, like definitely the pining. And trying to understand what love is and what girlfriends are and all that stuff. It's just like you're really too young, but still you have desire. It's strange.
I had probably 800 crushes as a kid, and they were all longing from a distance.
Yeah, I had plenty of Patty Mayonnaises in my life.
Yeah, I think I felt based on television as a kid before I knew my interest in men. I think I felt that television told me I had to have crushes on girls. So there were like in elementary school, there were girls I officially called a crush because I was like, I'm supposed to have this. It's a crush. And I look back on that as just like cute, non-sexual feelings. That's all that Doug has too. He's just like, this is a girl that makes me feel funny. That's all.
I have to wonder though, you mentioned that, Henry, like how much of it is nature and how much of it is nurture? Like was Doug instructional in my life? Like teaching boys like, this is a normal thing to do, like to
and
pine.
You're not normal if you don't have.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was not the only show that had that kind of relationship in it.
Goofy
it's very
movie
much
had
Goofy
the same
movie.
thing,
yeah. Peanuts, Charlie Brown, the little red-haired girl. Like, it's throughout the history of all written works. There are these things,
There's
but
love in that.
It felt like a bit instructional to me as a kid. Like you're supposed to have crushes. Of course, I had feelings for girls growing up, but this was sort of maybe helped form that idea in my head. Who knows?
I wonder. Well, a major part of having a crush too is keeping it a secret. It's more like the fun of it, even more so than feeling a crush for another. Feeling affection for another person is the secret part of it.
Yeah,
you're keeping it to yourself, and it's also a major moment of a trust exercise when your best bud finds out about your crush. And you're like, is this person actually my friend, or are they going to tell on my crush and humiliate me and prove they're not my friend?
Or if you want to be a total coward and have your friend tell your crush that you like them.
Oh yes, yeah.
it's a move. It's a move.
I was a little too forward in letting my crush. I didn't really do secret crush. I did. No, you over there, You're my crush. You're my crush. Come over here. You're my crush. Come on.
I used to pine for much longer, but now I'm very much more direct. And telling your crush you likes them works out of like one out of every 8 times, I think, depending on the person.
That's why I had so many. Like I had like a 2% success rate, so I just kept going.
Anyone listening, if you have a crush, get it out of the way.
I'm seeing a lot. Crush cultures really continues on Twitter. I see many people talk about on Twitter about how they have so many crushes, and they when they hit like on a crush's Twitter account, they feel different.
Crush that like button.
Or they're afraid they're like, oh, if I hit too many likes on my crush's account, they're going to know I have a crush.
I've had thoughts about that. Like, this is too many likes. Am I showing too many cards? Maybe people have crushes on us.
If that was made today, there would be an episode about Doug and Skeeter panicking about Doug accidentally favoriting one of Patty's old photos on Instagram.
Oh, God.
It proves I'm going through old stuff. Yeah.
Why did Doug favorite this at 4 a.m?
This is from 2 years ago.
Hey, man, we're writing modern Doug right here.
Somebody hire us.
His banjo and creativity stuff reminds me, too, of Craig Bartlett. Craig Bartlett and Arnold are two sides of the same coin. And so I feel like Doug is this is his musical outlet, just like Arnold has, and it feels like what Jim Jenkins had as a kid too. Like the banjo, man, that's a hard instrument to play. Like
so tiny. So Skeeter and Doug are walking down the street. Skeeter is singing the accursed secret song, and they hear something.
What a dick.
Yeah, he is kind of a dick. I think he's doing it innocently. It's a catchy song. I've got it in my head. They hear Mr. Dink moaning and think he's in pain, but it turns out to be much worse.
Into your arms I fall tenderly.
It's a video.
I made it this afternoon. Do you like it?
Like it? We thought you were dying.
Yes, I do. Quiet. What's that, Mosquito?
He said we were dying to hear your song, Mr. Dink.
Right the first time, boys.
There's a new store at the mall where you make your own music videos. It's the latest thing in video techno fun. And to my surprise, it's very inexpensive.
Hey, Doug, why don't you do a video, huh?
Me?
Sure, you can even sing one of your own songs if you want. Who knows, Douglas? Maybe this could be your big break.
Big break?
I did not leave in the awful rap song where Doug is Marky Mark. But Mr. Dink, another major character in the show, his catchphrase was very expensive. So the joke is he says surprisingly inexpensive. And it's funny, if you watch the pilot, Doug Can't Dance, Mr. Dink is like the primary adult character in that pilot. Like, there's no other parents, really.
So, do you know if Jim Jenkins has kids? I would assume he had kids at some point.
He had kids later in life, like in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Okay, so then he was living the Dink life of having no kids. How long? It was only a few years ago I realized that Mr. Dink means double income, no kids.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Oh, is this news to you?
Blew my mind.
Oh, my God. We have to, God. I can't even talk.
Yes, that's double income, no kids is how jealous parents reveal, like they are broke by having children. That's why your parents can't have nice things, because you exist. But if you are double income with no kids, then you just spend it all on junk like Mr. Dink does.
Watching Doug now, Mr. Dink is my aspirational character. I want to be him. I want all of his gadgets.
Well, now the money doesn't go as far as it did in the 90s, though. That's Dink is the boom, has a boom economy going on there. But yeah, that's I learned that a few years ago, that Dink specifically means double income,
That
no
is
kids.
too clever. I didn't know that term existed back then. Amazing. It's amazing.
Though,
That's it. That was the last thing I had to learn. I can ascend now.
Mrs. Dink, though, what does she get out of this relationship?
I don't know.
I gotta assume it's like really great in the bedroom.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't bring up a Dom sub thing, Henry.
No, I do that often.
You go to that well.
I mean, she definitely wears the pants in the family.
That's
and
true.
I don't know I don't believe they ever say what Mr. Dink does. She does eventually become the mayor too. So
yeah,
that's her. Maybe she's always in politics. Honestly, maybe that's where all her money comes from, is that she's a political operative.
She's part of a dynasty or something. Yeah, I like her Doris Grau style delivery. It's just very flat, very disappointed. But yeah, Mr. Dink made his own music video at one of those places at the mall. I never experienced these in my childhood. I know they exist because I see that one gif of the kid voguing a lot. The little kid voguing in the early 90s where like the New York skyline is behind him. He's dancing like crazy on this animated gif. But did any of us actually encounter this phenomenon, this making your own music video thing? They were real.
Yeah, they were real. If you look up, if you Google the Great Northington Mall lip sync booths, I think they call them, there's a bunch of videos somebody collected of this kind of thing, of people coming in and lip syncing the songs and their rudimentary special effects. I didn't ever see any of these. I did see and participate in ones where you sung and they put it on a cassette tape.
Okay.
I didn't see that either. Yeah.
No video, but yeah, actually this kind of deal, Leo, dates back to the 1920s. They used to have booths where you would record thing on vinyl. So this kind of idea has been in existence for almost 100 years.
I like how tied to VHS it is in this episode. Like, this is it's also one of the most dated ones because it's all about VHS.
We're now 30 years later and living through the era of TikTok. Are you aware of TikTok?
Oh, God.
Every video I see of TikTok is cursed.
I feel 8 million years old and feel like, this TikTok bullshit.
It makes my skin crawl because everyone shares the worst videos, although there can't be any good TikTok videos. But if you don't know what TikTok is, consider yourself lucky because you don't want to know what it is.
When Doug imagines music videos, it really shows that he's watching a lot of VH1 and MTV as a kid, maybe more than his parents should be allowing. I don't know, thinks like he imagines Marky Mark, even as the girl, like BB, Connie, and Patty as his fly girls. I like more the Think Big music video. That's my favorite.
The Talking Heads video. One?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it goes from Talking Heads to the Fat Boys to it's like a bunch of music video
pastiche. Yeah, totally.
Think Big.
So they go to Video Goofball, and Mr. Bone is sneaking in, and we see the silhouette of Patty in one of the booths. This will all play off later.
He looks
pay
like
off
he's-
later.
Bone looks like he's going to jerk off.
That's
in the
what it
booth.
looks like.
Really,
He's wearing the overcoat and everything.
I feel like they're having a little fun there. The
Yeah,
animators are.
I think so.
Though Doug's pretty stupid to not recognize Patty's outline
Silhouette,
in
and
the
to hear
booth.
Killer
Yeah.
Tofu being played, his
Yeah.
favorite song. I can't believe that. So they're in the booth, and Skeeter turns up the heat.
Skeeter, don't give me any ideas.
Sorry, man. I take it back. You won't get the hiccups. You won't forget your words. You ready? Hiccup.
I forgot all the
Words.
There I was, under the glaring lights, the cameras rolling, and me with the hiccups. I couldn't think of a single song to sing. Except... Patty, you the ketchup on my fries. Patty, you the ice in my... Patty, you the mustard on my... Which? You're the mayonnaise for me. Oh, Patty, you're the... in my coleslaw. You're the sugar in my tea.
So it's the worst possible version of Doug's secret song.
Me and my friends, as a joke, sometimes we would sing the hiccup version of that song. It was kind of like a test of like, hey, who remembers this? This was like in like 97 or something.
So what was it like to be Florida's coolest teenager?
Well, and Skeeter's really cramping in that booth. They're like, you know what? Wait outside, Skeeter.
He doesn't need to be there.
It's a very small booth.
Seems to be freaking Doug out.
But I like his little finger gun stance
Yeah.
though, in the corner. Pork Chop can be there because he's actually a good wingman, not like the very like absent-minded Skeeter, who's also just getting Doug more in his head, which he does not need help on.
He's already living in there, rent free even. So Patty ends up being there, as the viewer saw earlier, and Doug runs into her, and then this is where the big screw up happens.
Yeah. Sorry I stomped on your foot, Skeeter. Well, you can stomp on mine if you want.
Cool, man. I'll save it for later. Hey, let's go back to your place and watch your video.
No way.
Fast food feels fuzzy, 'cause it's made from stuff that's fuzzy. I always thought I was such a nerd. How you?
Gee, you sure look different on TV, Doug.
Oh, no. The girl at the store gave me Patty's video by mistake.
Huh? Then whose did she get?
I did get a bit of Peanuts in their scream, them throwing their heads back and screing a bit.
Oh, yeah.
But now that I think about it, Killer Tofu is sort of like a Pixies B-side. I can hear Frank Black singing that.
And it's fun hearing Constance sing that. She's going for it, but in character as Patty. Well, and the mix up there is, I talked about how when you know the ending of the other episode, actions don't make sense. This one does make sense because not only do you see Bone and Patty, they're all recording at the same time.
Right.
But also the woman has Doug's in one hand and Patty's and Bones Doug and Bones in the other hand. So that's how Patty took the wrong of the two that were in the left hand.
It is a well done contrivance. I will say that, but it's also that if this were a real situation, Doug should worry.
Yes.
It's very unlikely that the tapes would have gotten mixed up.
No, in this case, he's not exactly wrong to worry. But also, I've never had an up all night party, as it was called. I mean,
It's a slumber party.
Yeah, I did sleep. I mean, I guess this is a boys and girls difference in the 90s. But I mean, I went to sleepovers. I did not. I like to sleep over with one friend. More than two boys, though, you end up with like just a lot of bullying. And
Lord of the Flies
coolness.
breaks out. Yeah.
Well, and as someone who would usually fall asleep the first, the good things don't happen when you're the first to fall asleep.
I think every slumber party starts out as we're going to stay up all night, and then you're out by like whatever time little 10. Kids fall asleep. Yeah.
I see my mistake now at sleepovers that I don't drink soda, and so the soda drinking kids could always stay awake longer.
That's why you needed coffee,
and that's and you know what? I enjoy Hellraiser without me, jerks. That's what I say.
Probably too scary, anyways.
Oh no! And also trying to admit I wasn't scared of watching Hellraiser while I definitely was. Oh, no. See, all my childhood was just anxieties, just like Doug. This is why he's so cool.
One lesson they don't teach Doug is the wrongness of breaking and entering and trespassing. Because he and Skeeter...
And standing outside of girls' windows.
Yes, and peeping on a slumber party. So Skeeter and Doug head off to BB's mansion. Of course, there's a snooty butler who says no boys allowed.
Also Billy West.
Also Billy West. And they send Porkchop in to steal the tape. So again, Doug is not learning the right lessons. Doug is learning the lesson. Everything will work out. Not like, hey, that's not your property.
You know what? Deal with it.
Yeah.
Just deal. I meant to say at the video place too. I love the design on the table where they drop off the videos is a big VHS tape.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's really cool. And they're specifically yellow VHS tapes, so that's how they can pick it out among the others, which reminded me of the wonderful garish orange of a Nickelodeon VHS tape. As a kid.
love the odd color VHS tapes.
Mm-hmm. Much easier to pick out when you don't specifically file them back away again, which if you're
surprised that didn't happen more often.
Maybe it costs more money or something.
I assume it did cost like a few more pennies per tape to get like the dye in there, something like that. So Porkchop gets a fun Mission Impossible sequence, sort of like Solid snaking his way around BB's mansion.
It's fun.
And
Her mansion's not big enough. I feel like it should. I think it grows bigger over time.
There's only so much time to get into that room, but he makes it to the room. They're all limboing. Porkchop tries to climb to the top of the TV to grab the tape, and then he falls, and they all notice him. And this is when Doug has a bizarre torture fantasy about Porkchop.
That's weird.
Let's listen to it.
It's Porkchop. Oh, no. Come on, Skeet.
You expect me to climb this thing?
Well, he might be in trouble. Maybe they caught him. They might be holding him hostage or something.
I'll ask you one more time, Earthling. What were you doing sneaking into my up-all-night party? He won't speak, Your Highness. His allegiance is to another. Silence! He knows the rules. No boys allowed. Now then, Earth Dog. Perhaps this will refresh your memory.
So women are aliens, and they're going to torture him with ice cream.
Torture said, I think Doug is working through some kinks in this fantasy.
I think so.
Here, right?
What if they tied me up? The
they
Peanutty...
make me talk as while they were in all their tight outfits.
The Peanutty Buddy was a recurring food item on Doug, I believe. That's what Porkchop was being taunted with.
Yeah, there's the ice cream cart they actually eat at in the next episode.
Okay.
Though my favorite of the candies, it was the chocolate that tastes like cement, and then they find out that it actually is cement being poured into it.
The little weird flex in there.
It tastes like cement. That's a good one. I do also like Doug's imagination of being the sentient TV and trying to turn himself off.
Yeah.
That's a fun fantasy.
It's a fun nightmare to be in.
I love the designs on their space alien B-movie outfits, though. They're really cool. They're not exactly Barbarella, but out of the same, closet.
They're like a G-rated version of that.
Yes, yeah. Thankfully so.
So Patty wants to watch the video.
I hope you'll like it. I know you will, Porkchop.
Oh, no. I'm ruined. My life is over.
Porkchop, what are you doing? You crazy dog! Don't you want to see my video? Porkchop, you're in the way. Well, we're going to see it whether you like it or not.
I can't look.
Hey, Doug!
Is it over? Are they still laughing? Has my life as I know it come to an end?
Look!
That's Mr. Bone from school.
It takes them a long time to react to that.
Yeah, they break for like, what? What? You know your vice principal immediately. Too, I think.
But now they've got the dirt on him.
They do. I think is he ashamed of being a yodeler? I don't know. He yodels other times.
When we go to their yodeling society, it seems like a real like Twin Peaks secret society they've got going on there.
I think there's
the mayor's there.
I think there is some sex aspect to that too.
Yeah.
I have to think.
I got more of the the Magic Society from Arrested Development.
Okay.
That's from them.
They have to do it in secret because yodeling is too shameful.
I mean, it's not cool.
Yeah.
But though, hey, I actually kind of like their yodeling song.
That's fun.
That song comes back more than a couple times in the
It
show.
definitely does. I have to say, I've got a soft spot for polka too because I grew up in a town with 2 polka stations.
2?
A very Polish town. So
Wow.
I like polka. I will never
My
dance the
polka
polka.
experience begins and ends with Weird Al.
That's good enough for most people.
Did Porkchop bring that costume with him? Like,
I don't know. Like, it's funny that Patty's like, "Oh, it's Porkchop." It's like, that's your friend's dog. Your friend
Yeah.
is here.
Yeah,
Look out the window.
My friend from the other side of the city.
His
dog's here.
His dog is hanging out with me, and now he's gonna do limbo with us.
This is very normal.
Yeah, it's the occasional moments like it breaks a reality of Doug.
It's the magical realism of Doug.
Mm-hmm.
But here is the epilogue at the Secret Yodelers Club.
If I had Patty's video and she had Mr. Bones,
That means
Patty, you're the ketchup on my fries.
What?
Patty, you're the ice.
Wait a minute. That's not me. Hey, that's not me at all.
Bone, is this your idea of a joke?
Well, I don't understand. This is some kind of mix-up. Well, that's not me. Anybody could tell that. I swear it's not me. What's a fun? How do you do?
Patty, you're the mustard on my sandwich, and Patty, you're the mayonnaise for me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Patty, you're the mayonnaise for me.
It's funny how invested the rest of those characters were in seeing that video. Like,
Yeah.
this is an outrage.
When it worked,
I wanted to see you yodel on video.
Yeah, it's like time to watch my cool video, guys. This yodeling we do in person, I made a video of it, and we're all gonna watch it.
And Mr. Bone left in disgrace, and now he
Mr.
knows.
Bone's main objection is, that's not me. Like that's the content. Like, you're actually a small child, Mr. No.
When I know he doesn't care, like I wouldn't care if one of my students had a crush, so I wouldn't give a shit. But he should at least know that that's Doug Funny. I'm gonna ask him about this video tomorrow or something like that. But the episode's over.
This
so
is
it
not
comes
the end
to
of it for
nothing.
Doug.
Yes, yeah.
And it ends with a nice instrumental version of the Patty song over the
Yeah.
credits. I like when they play like music from the show over the credits when there was still time to play the credits in the simpler age.
And I love it feels very, early Doug or even like commercial work of Jim Jenkins, the waving goodbye animation, like flip book kind of style.
I like when he's like holding his hand because he's waving for so long.
And
it's
then,
very cute.
And then sometimes I remember they would change the credit song when Porkchop would put on his headphones.
Yeah.
Like it would work into it. Not all the time, not in this one either, but they played around with that stuff. They even had their own kind of Simpsons couch gag too every time with the Doug's whatever for the name of the episode.
Yeah, you're right. Something different would happen?
Yeah, I mean, Porkchop, they'd turn on the light, Doug would present his name, and then Porkchop would write what it would be, and then sometimes he'd throw the paint bucket at the screen, sometimes he'd turn the screen back off.
Okay, yeah. I forgot there were variants on that.
There'd be little different adventures going on there. Like that was, post-Simpsons, the rule was you had to have your own couch gag too in every cartoon.
So what did Doug learn in this episode?
He did learn that there's a God there. He says somebody up there likes me. Which,
Yeah.
when you say the religious upbringing of Jim Jenkins, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that actually is him saying God watches out for you if you're a good kid.
It feels like Doug was being punished unjustly for a while, though. Like, why was Doug made to suffer? Why do good things happen to?
Well, why does it happen to Job, Bob?
That's
It's
true.
just-
Wow, Doug is our modern Job of television.
It's to test his faith. And
I
he
want to bring
should.
up some of the writers for the show real quick.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The Doug Takes the Case was written by Ken Scarborough, who is a regular writer for the show. He is currently the head writer for Sesame Street.
Excellent,
Oh,
yeah.
wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Doug's Secret Song is written by Tim Grunman, who before this, he's mostly known for Doug, but before this, he was one of the main writers for the new Mickey Mouse Club.
Interesting.
In the 80s. The one guy I really want to bring up, though, is the writer for Doug Throws a Party, which we did not cover, which was written by Kenneth Lonergan. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The director of Manchester by the Sea.
Really? What? That's
Wow.
crazy.
Wow.
For real. The Manchester by the Sea guy wrote an episode of Doug.
It's the darkest episode of Doug you've seen.
He was right. In that case, he was right to think everybody hated
Doug,
him.
let that kid die. Wow, I had no idea. This is blowing my mind more than
amazing.
Dink.
Yeah.
One guy we covered recently, we started covering the first season of King of the Hill for a Patreon series, Talking of the Hill. Joe Stillman wrote a few episodes of Doug. He is the writer of Shrek, but also he wrote for Adventures of Pete and Pete and King of the Hill and other things. So a lot of people came from Doug. It's been 30 years. They've all moved on to
They
bigger
have to have
things.
other careers.
Yeah.
They don't all disappear afterwards. But wow,
The director of Manchester by the Sea.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's the most anti-Doug movie.
Yes, it is.
He was, while working for Jim Jenkins, he's imagining the dark stories he wants to tell. Wow.
God. Again, I have a soft spot for Doug. I feel like this is the common problem these episodes have, is that the story wraps up with just like this contrivance. And at a certain point as a kid, it would make me mad. Like there was one episode that I was talking to you about, Henry, that Doug was addicted to a video game and he kept putting off this report. And the finale was Doug realized it was the Sunday instead of Monday, so he had an extra day. So it's like, well, what do I take from this? Sometimes things will work out. I didn't know what to take from it. It just seemed like there are always these weird contrivances in Doug that were just a common thing that happened to wrap up the story. Like they were twists, but they're kind of unsatisfying.
Yeah, Doug was my favorite of the three original Nicktoons, but today I kind of recognize it opened the door for these kind of shows, but it definitely wasn't the best of these kind of comedy, drama, tween shows.
I mean, it was satisfying as a kid to watch because you would feel the anxiety Doug felt, and then, oh, the problem's over. I feel good too because Doug is okay. But now as an adult, I'm like, this is just like an act of God that saved Doug.
Yeah, and then I would learn later in middle school that when I had similar Doug problems, they something didn't solve them for me. They then often left like hurt feelings or friendships being over or something like that.
And you were right to worry, it turns out sometimes.
Yeah. But Doug is an inoffensive, innocent show. That's what I liked about it then and still like about it now. Though I think, it doesn't have the animation too doesn't have the kind of flourishes that even like Rugrats have, let alone Ren and Stimpy. So it kind of doesn't stick in your memory that way either. And I think too, though, that the Doug has been more lost to time than its two brothers because it wasn't in Nickelodeon's interest to keep advertising it or to keep the interest alive for it, as opposed to Rugrats or in Ren and Stimpy. And it's up to Disney to keep Doug in people's imaginations, and they don't do that either. So,
and it didn't have any of those contentious behind-the-scenes stories that both Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy had.
Yeah, it seemed like Jim...
It was a very calm production.
It seemed like Jim was fun to work with and got everything done on time, and everything was very amicable.
Real steady Eddie.
Yeah, and he went on to make lots of other shows. The Ren and Stimpy creator did not.
No, he's a very productive guy. Like he's like like Craig Bartlett too. I was surprised just how much he just made. You know, it's not making 100 episodes of a PBS kids show is not that interesting to tell a story about, but it's a productive artist making things in corporate culture. Like it's just, maybe those guys aren't always fun auteurs. And often I've kind of turned on the whole auteur stories that I loved as a kid too, because they often feel like they're meant to cover a bad person. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, with Doug, I feel like the reason I kind of have a fondness for it is because it presents a very idealized world where no problem is too big. Everyone is friends. There are no real problems like drugs or any sort of sexual harassment or abuse or any sort of real bullying.
No teacher out to get you either.
The worst thing the bullies do is leave stinky cheese on the radiator.
It's very, very innocent, and I like...
If Roger were to punch Doug, you'd be like, oh my goodness, Roger.
That's too far. But I mean, in a way, it's nice and comforting and cozy. But in another way, I think it's not a great show for kids because it does present this world where things are too safe and it might give you the wrong idea. I think something like Hey Arnold could be a better show for modern kids because it shows like people will disappoint you, like we saw with the Pigeon Man episode we did. It's like a more realistic show, a more melancholy show. Like Doug never left you feeling melancholy.
Arnold gets mugged in an episode and then gets into karate and starts beating people up because he's scared of it happening again. Like dark things happen in Arnold's world and he perseveres from them, as opposed to, nothing too bad ever happens to Doug.
Yeah. So any final thoughts, Greg?
No, I think we nailed it. Yeah, it's a very pleasant show. I think I even enjoy it more now when I can kind of separate myself. Like, oh, this is a nice, ideal watercolor storybook. It's almost Sandlotty in terms of this ideal look back at child, which it is. This is as much a Jim Jenkins looking back at his own childhood fondly kind of thing, where you scrub out just the crap and you're just left with that ideal nostalgia. And it's pleasant.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an accurate depiction of growing up in 1991. It was even idealized for that seemingly more innocent time too. But I can definitely see how it's Jim Jenkins sort of putting older values on the then presence, I think. So we're going to wrap up here. Before we go, we're going to do our plugs when we're off the line with you, Greg. But we talked about your amazing YouTube channel, Pop Arena. You've got a Patreon. Please let people know where to find that and what you do. Remind them again.
My YouTube channel is Pop Arena. It is home of several projects. The most well-known is Knickknacks, which is a show-by-show retrospective on the entire history of Nickelodeon. Every single thing that ever aired on Nickelodeon will be covered at some point if I can beat global warming.
You might make it with Doug.
I might make it with Doug. You can find that Pop Arena. You can find me on Twitter at pop_arena. I also have projects on Doctor Who. I have projects on Goosebumps, and just some anime, some animation, some book reviews. There's a little bit of something for everyone there.
Yeah, it's a great collection of stuff. I mean, definitely I think You Can't Do That on Television is a great one to start with. If I would do a pick from your stuff, or the Pinwheel one. Those are both two of your best.
And very entertaining.
Very entertaining, yes. You really balance a way of like being more in depth than anybody. I've watched a lot of retrospective history of videos on YouTube, and it comes to a certain point for animation that a lot of people are just repeating the same history that can be found on your first Google search, but you really, really do the research, and I appreciate that so much, just as a viewer and as somebody who does their own nostalgic podcasts. Like that is just so entertaining.
Thank you very much.
So thanks again to Greg for being on the show. As we said before, a lot on this podcast. We love his videos. They're great. He's got a Patreon. Look for Pop Arena. That's 2 words. And if you like our in-depth histories of old things, you'll love his. In fact, you might like his more. He does a lot of research. We're in trouble. Maybe don't watch his. No, I'm kidding. Please watch his.
We do a good deal of research, but I mean, I would, if we were doing You Can't Do This on Television, I would not watch 500 episodes of British children's sketch shows. Like, honestly, I'd be uncomfortable after the first episode of like, I have to stop doing this.
My skin will be crawling off of my body. But Greg does that hard research. He tortures himself to make amazing videos. So check out Pop Arena on YouTube. As for us, we are part of the Talking Simpsons Network. Please go to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons to find out how to help us out and support the show. For the low cost of $5, you can get so much bonus content. You can get every episode of this podcast 1 week ahead of time and ad-free. And the same goes for our sister show, Talking Simpsons. With that $5 a month, you'll also get all kinds of bonus things like exclusive series like Talking Futurama, Talking Critic, and the coming soon Talking of the Hill. Coming very soon, the entire first season of Talking of the Hill will be rolling out starting in mid-March.
And you can only hear those if you give us $5 a month at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. And not only that, but you'll also get access to our amazing catalog of interviews with folks from mainly The Simpsons, but a couple other areas. We just did a brand new interview with Josh Weinstein, one of the showrunners of seasons 7 and 8. We did an interview with Jeff Martin, one of the seasons 2 through 4 writers on the series as well, and a ton of other folks who have been working on The Simpsons, in some cases from the very beginning on Tracy Ullman. They're all there and available to anybody who gives $5 a month to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons.
And we have a new $10 tier, which includes our What a Cartoon Movie podcast. If you like us talking about cartoon episodes, we have a podcast where we talk about cartoon movies at the $10 level. Our recent one, A Goofy Movie, is our longest one yet at 3 hours and I believe 35 minutes. Is that it?
Yeah,
something like that. 28.
minutes.
28, 35. Who's counting at that point? But we wanted to make a very high quality bonus podcast for you at the $10 level, which used to be the video tier. Now we've been doing since November one cartoon movie every month that you get to vote on. They've been fantastic podcasts. We've done things like Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Kiki's Delivery Service, Akira, and now A Goofy Movie. And you will get to vote on the next movie we do if you're part of the $5 and up tier.
Yes, we did so much research in all those movie ones. Goofy Movie, we learned a ton about the history of it that was a little harder to find. And Akira, we did a ton, Bob did a ton of research on the manga it came from, the animation industry then, and how it also changed everything with its dub too. They're really like triple podcasts that you get once a month at the $10 and up level. So if you love What a Cartoon, listen to this What a Cartoon Movie podcast. I think you'll enjoy it.
And if you're interested, there are free previews of those movie podcasts in the What a Cartoon feed. You can get a little taste of each really, really long podcast for free if you want to check it out ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that is patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Any amount you want to give and subscribe at would be just fine with us. That's our full-time jobs, and everything you give us will help support the show, and we'll make even more shows on top of that. So as for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo. My other podcast is Retronauts, a classic gaming podcast. Every Monday and occasionally on Friday, please go to retronauts.com or look for Retronauts in your podcast device. It's a classic gaming podcast. I think you'll like it. Lots of people do. Listen to them. Henry, how about you?
Hey, I'm Henry Gilbert, and if you'd like to see when new episodes go live on this show and on Talking Simpsons and anything else on the Patreon, you should follow me on Twitter at HENEREYG. If you follow me there, I tweet out every time something new happens on the Patreon, and I also have tons of thoughts on other cool things that you'll learn all about if you were to follow me on Twitter, HENEREYG.
Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll see you next week for the OKKO Let's Be Heroes episodes, TKO's House, and Crossover Nexus. We'll see you then.